So thank you for tuning in to our regional interviews. The goal of these is to make sure people know homelessness is an issue across the entire state, not just the Twin Cities metro region. And our guest today can speak uniquely on that. We have Reed Olson, who is a Beltrami County Commissioner, and he's also the Executive Director of a homeless shelter called Nameless Coalition. So Reed, both titles that you wear, county commissioner and executive director, has all sorts of responsibilities. It's not easy, but can you just explain why? Why did you do both of those, and why do you care about ending homelessness so much?
Sure. First, thanks for letting me take part in this series of interviews. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, we started working towards this goal back in 2013 of opening up a homeless shelter in Bemidji that really focused on single adults experiencing substance use disorder. We opened up the shelter in February of 2016. So there's a few years of kind of figuring out what we were doing. And I coming into this, I was just kind of a concerned citizen, and I didn't really know my background. I is in the culinary arts. I have a degree, a 4-year degree in history, and I've been in kitchens pretty much since I was 14. So I have about 30 years of kitchen experience. But we had a rising deaths amongst unsheltered population in our community some years ago, and people really started to come together to try to figure out what to do about it. And so initially, I was just another concerned citizen. At the time, I had recently gotten onto the Bemidji City Council, and in working on these sorts of housing issues and homelessness issues, I wanted to do more from a political perspective. And small cities don't really do much in health and human services. That's more the bailiwick of counties and states. So when there was an opportunity, I ran after 4 years on the city council, I ran for county board because I wanted to work more in that kind of human services aspect. And so I kind of backed into, I don't know, I'm an accidental advocate for homelessness issues. It wasn't something that I set out to do, but as I got more and more involved in it, I really understood just how important housing was for individuals' happiness and for a better functioning society. It became more and more of a passion of mine.
That's pretty. It's always nice to get a little sneak peek into who the person is, why you do what you do. So thank you for that. And I know and Bemidji in general, and you especially as well, have been doing some really cool things in your community. Could you talk a little bit about, what you've done? And then also, do you think we need more resources, and why, if so?
Yeah, so our shelter is, I don't know if it's unique in the state of Minnesota, but we are one of the shelters we always talk about barriers to entry or access, and we have an almost zero barrier entry to our shelter. And so unlike many shelters, and there's reasons different people different organizations take different slices of the pie. But what we looked at is, where are the people going that are in the throes of substance use disorder, that are current users and have nowhere to sleep? A lot of shelters won't take someone in if they're visibly intoxicated, or they'll have a breathalyzer. And we don't really do any of that. And so we let people in who are under the influence. It's very challenging, but it's a very vulnerable population. So we started doing that in 2016, and I remember my very first Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless conference that I went to. I was listening to a group of people from rural Minnesota, about 5 or 6 people, talking about the need for such a shelter like this in their community. But they're saying, "Oh, but we could never get the funds together, think of the liability." And then I leaned over and I said, "We just kind of did it." With, and it's working. The demographic that we work with at times can be challenging, but just by building up really strong personal relationships and showing that we're a place that really cares for people and shows people respect, and it's a dignified place for them to be, that does a lot to curb behavioral issues. It's not a cure-all, of course, but so it's been exciting to do that, to have this kind of almost like a pilot project of very low barrier to entry. And then another thing that I'm really proud of, that I'll give more credit to the county, especially the Health and Human Services Department and our community health director. In late March of 2020, once the COVID pandemic was really on everybody's radar, my board decided to shut down our shelter because we were a congregate care facility, and they didn't want to be a vector of contamination or of spreading the virus. That was a Monday. By Friday, we were operating the shelter at a local hotel in an annex in a separated area, and that was really done because of the hard work of Cynthia Borgen and Becky Secor and Jeff Lind from the Human Services Department, and Cynthia, our community health director. And so we were able to move our operations there. And I should give a shout out to the state of Minnesota as well, because their emergency funding kind of bankrolled that experiment, and we were able to move to the hotel and have people stay in the hotel. Ended up not being the perfect fit for some of the challenges that our clientele bring, but we did do it for about 5 weeks, and then under new kind of guidelines, we reopened at the shelter, at the Wolf, our shelter, and continued operating there, and where we still do now. But being able to have that space, which was then used up until very recently as a convalescent space, because then if we do have someone that tests positive or is presumed to be sick, we really don't want them in our congregate care facility where it's open space, everybody's sharing a room. So to be able to isolate people at that hotel worked out really well. And the couple of scares that we did have, where we did have people that tested positive, we were able to quarantine them over the first night that they were with us, and then move them to a safe place to convalesce. And so that really cut down on transmission amongst our population. And really, the transmission amongst our population it wasn't zero, but it was very near zero, just a handful of people. So I'm really proud of the work that we did in conjunction with our community health partners, and with Sanford Health also worked really hard with us on that.
Yeah, so we're getting close to our time, but I do just want to, kind of as a final question, do you have a message for advocates, that may be tuning in and watching this? And then, maybe even touch a little bit, like, you've done so great with COVID, but what about future resources? Why are they so important? Because COVID's not always going to be around, but we still need these resources. So do you have a message? And then also, why are future resources so needed?
Well, my message to other advocates around the state is to not give up, and to when we set out, though we had some people that had experience working with unsheltered populations, a lot of us were novices, and a lot of us didn't know how impossible our goal was. And that's really what helped us achieve it, is by not thinking about the fact that this, on paper, this really doesn't work out. But we really just persevered and just kept on going, and just made it happen. And that's what I would really say to other people around the state is, if you think your community needs a similar project, I mean, for one, reach out to me or other people that are doing it, but go for it. Talk to your local electeds, talk to your police department, show them how this is a benefit. I often, as a politician, it's easy to focus on the compassionate end and tell people, well, we need to help our neighbors, but there's also a fiscal end. A lot of what we're doing ends up saving county government resources, saving state government resources. Safe and housed people are less expensive than people that are unsheltered. So as far as ongoing resources, this has kind of been a golden era for shelters in Minnesota. There have been resources made available to us that have never been available before. The problem though, and some of us then, and myself, my organization included, we're looking at expanding to day services. And we got some initial money to kind of make that happen. But in order to be able to sustain it, we're going to need increased funding from the state. And that is a fear of mine, that when these dollars run out and these grant periods that we're working with run out in early 2022, are we going to have the funds and the resources necessary to be able to sustain these very valuable programs that have proven themselves through this pandemic? So that's my hope to the state, is that they will increase the funding to emergency shelter programs so that we can continue doing the good work and shrink the amount of time that it takes to rehouse someone, and hopefully prevent many more people from finding themselves unsheltered.
Right. Thank you, Reed. So that was a good message for both advocates and, some of our state legislators to hear. So thank you a ton. If you're watching, I do put in the YouTube notes a link to the different organizations of people we've interviewed. So I'll be sure to put Reed's, the website of their shelter in the description notes. So thank you, Reed, and thanks to everybody for watching.
Thank you very much, Matt.